who you are in the context around you, and then also keeping an eye on what's going on out there in the wider world. So all the time just being aware of what it is that's important, and in terms of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Now, I talked before about leadership and the importance of honesty. Well, honesty begets trust, and I often talk about trust as being the absolute glue that binds leaders together with followers. In other words, if you can create a trusting organisation, and in fact I had quite a feisty discussion on this at lunchtime today up in Whangarei, where I was talking about a bit of a relationship breakdown that's occurred with a couple of parties up there, and we were talking about the fact they've lost trust with each other. And one of the parties I was at lunch with, who happens to be an alumni of Leadership New Zealand, and we were able to have the really open conversation that actually said, what is it that's broken down that trust, and how do you rebuild trust when someone's actually literally you've lost any belief that they will follow through, etc. So that understanding of trust and the fact that it is so important means as a leader you need that. You're not always going to love the people that you deal with. You're not always going to even like them. But they need to trust you and you them. If you don't have that, you've got actually a serious issue. So we can talk more about that if you wish. I've actually got here about a leader has to know what's important. Don't sweat the small stuff. You know, we all worry about stuff, but actually 99% of it isn't that important. I think as a leader you have to be really clear about what it is that really matters, and have a clarity about how you actually put that into action. Caring. I talked a bit about this, about the excellent person, you know, the person of character that we talked about before. Caring, actually, I saw this in action when I was a Harkness Fellow. So I was fortunate enough to get a Harkness Fellowship sponsored by the Commonwealth Fund of New York, and I spent a whole year based at Duke University, travelled around the US talking to key leaders around the US, and it was wonderful actually. I could ring them up and I could say, hello, I'm Jo Brosnahan, I'm from New Zealand, I'm here sponsored by the Commonwealth Fund of New York, and most of them knew the Commonwealth Fund, and I'm here interviewing the best of leaders in the United States. Can I come and talk to you? And oddly enough, no one turned me down. So I actually, almost any door opened. So, but interestingly enough, the leader that actually impressed me the most wasn't a grand leader, the name wasn't well known. He'd been recommended to me by one of my mentors. It was a guy called Harry Nurkin, and he ran a big health facility down in Charlotte in North Carolina, and we were living in North Carolina. But the interesting thing that Richard did was that, Harry did, was that he actually had arrived there, and it was a really rundown facility, and people had sort of lost belief in what they were about and such. And so first of all, he started doing up their environment, not the front office or the whatever. He started saying to them, which bits do you care about? He started turning up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning in accident and emergency, because it showed that he actually cared about them. He was actually prepared to get engaged. The interesting thing was his philosophy was, you care about the people and they care about the bottom line. He didn't ever care about the bottom line. And the success of his business, and it was a business, was absolutely remarkable. So that idea of actually caring. Involving others. Ultimately, it's about, leadership's about others. It's not about you. I heard actually someone from the ministry today talk about leadership models and about, you know, the leader, importance of the leader. But actually I said, well, what about leadership? In other words, within your organisation, so we lots of leaders. It's not just you, or, you know, if you're the CEO, actually everyone else is more important. So we do get confused with this idea that we need a leader. We don't, we need leadership plural. So I think that's really important. You've got to know your own energy. And for those of you who've been involved with the Leadership New Zealand program, I think this is particularly something Louise is very concerned about right now. But energy, I've come to realise, is actually really, really key to particularly getting new projects off the ground and such, because you actually have to go so much beyond what is normal energy just in order to make things happen. Essentially, if you're ever trying to start anything new, and I'm doing this at the moment with the Taitokerau Education Trust, it's like pushing a fully laden truck uphill without any engine. And, of course, as soon as you lose a bit of energy, it starts, sliding back on top of you, and you've got to get as much help as you can to push it on up over the hill. And you can't lose belief and you can't lose energy. But also, we carry our energy with us. People connect with our energy. I'm sure as time goes on, a lot more research is going to be done about this. But if you come in like this, or like this, people know the difference. You carry your energy with you, and they take the signals from your energy. So I remember my PA, the receptionist, when I was Auckland Regional Council CEO, saying to me, "Jo, when the lesson from the receptionist, Jo, when you come in and you've had a bad morning and you walk up the stairs, the whole building feels it." And I went, "That's really mean. I've had a bad morning. All I did was walk up the stairs and into my office." But I suddenly stopped and thought, and I said, "So what happens if I feel good?" And she said, "The whole building feels that too." So I don't know how that happens, but I suddenly felt responsible for how I showed my energy. So until then, I'd felt it was my right to show how I felt. Suddenly I realised I had a responsibility to, the 100 people in the building to actually be responsible for what I was showing. So I think energy, know your own energy and how it influences others. Mindfulness, something that is a new take at the moment in terms of that understanding that you need to actually know yourself in terms of your own development as an authentic leader. You need to actually realise that you need to learn to live in the present. And there's lots of ways of doing that, which I won't go into right now. But this is the idea of understanding your thoughts, your actions, meditation, breathing, those things are all part of this. And in fact, I run a program for logistics and transport people that run container terminals and so on, and I introduce this stuff to them and they all sort of roll their eyes to start with, and by about the second or third session they're beginning to say, "Can we do more of that? That was fabulous." And so again, there's the thing about mindfulness: stop, take a breath, observe, proceed. So learn to live in the moment, not always looking to the future or whatever. Listening, I won't go into this into too much, but the concept that in fact leadership is about truly learning to listen to others is really, really important, because actually most people will have things that ultimately, if you're doing all the talking, you're not learning. But if you're listening, you're open to actually everyone else's ideas. Levels of listening, I won't go too much into that, but I'd say if you're interested in this, there's some wonderful work done by Otto Scharmer that actually looks at levels of listening. I like to actually always say, look at the top. It's where you go at News Talk ZB. It's where you start with Leighton Smith and what's his name in the morning, and Mike Hosking, etc. So you just, what you hear is reconfirming what you think. It makes you feel good. You come down to the next level and you're suddenly actually listening and noticing differences, you're observing and actually learning. But you come down to the third, which is empathetic listening. You're actually suddenly listening to hear and feel what you're feeling. I won't go into the fourth because that's the whole concept of presencing, which if you want to know more, grab me afterwards. So here are a few things that I suggest to you as leaders that you need to think about doing. Think about journaling. How many of you have ever journaled? Okay, so it's about having a conversation with yourself. So the idea that actually part of learning to be an authentic leader is to learn to have a conversation with yourself. Again, I can go into that later. Create your own personal mission. How many of you got a personal mission? How many of you are clear about what you're about? 1, 2, 3, few of you. If you go online, there's Stephen Covey has a mission builder, which is really quite interesting. You can get on there and you can fill it out. Sort of spits out all these words, But look at that and ask what it's telling you about what you care about, what you stand for, and what you might be here for. That idea of actually writing it down, it's like anything, it just has a magic to it. Write it down. I suggest too that you develop yourself a life map. There's something interesting. One of the things I get people to do in leadership programs is to actually develop a map of where they've been, what their journey is about, what have been the high points and the low points, because they will give you some indication of where you need to focus your future. And your plan. So who's the person you want to be? That's where I'd start. Who is authentic you? You know, this isn't about, I want to be a CEO and therefore next I'm going to be a manager, and this isn't about that. That's a career plan, and if you want one of those you can have one. This is about a leadership plan. It's knowing who you are and how you interrelate with other people, and actually what you're going to do about your personal development around that. And I'd suggest that, and you've got some of these, you get a coach and a mentor to actually help you with that reflection and thinking about that. A coach will help you better understand yourself. A mentor will help you actually in terms of that planning to the future. And finally, there's a lovely little thing that I'd recommend that you do, and that is draw your future. Now on TED Talks, you all know about TED Talks? Go onto TED Talks, and there's a talk by a woman called Patty Dobrovolsky. There you are. I'll give you the thing later if you wish. And essentially what she does, if you go and have a look, she actually does a whole exercise on how you draw your future and take control of your life. It's a wonderful exercise to do, and for those of you who are married, I tell you what, it's a really good exercise to do with your partner. So I got my husband to do this. I said, you need to do this, and anyone that knows my husband would say, well, he would go, do I really have to do this? Yes, you do. So I want you to draw. So what they asked you to do is draw where you are now and where you would like to be in the future. So he drew this thing of where he was now, and it had all these people with blindfolds on it. And I went, okay. You know, and I've driven, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And then the future, and I'm doing even more stuff here, and he's sort of just got a few little things and a person lying there reading a book, and I'm going, okay. Well, so, and suddenly it became a conversation. I mean, suddenly we could actually both look at and say, actually, we live together. We do, actually. We love each other dearly. And but if you're going to be doing that and I'm going to be doing all this, I don't know that it's all going to work, but let's actually talk about it. So that idea that you, the leader, are you, the person, and actually you're also you, the person with all those people around is fabulous. So I leave you with that. Go and actually give it a go, and I'll give you the URL link. So I'm going to read you a poem to finish. I talk too much, so I'm sorry. And I should have marked the page, and I haven't, so I'm not very efficient either, so. But I would say I'll just promote Selena's book, which probably is probably out of print. Please let me find it. She's written New Zealand, the Lucky Country, which I absolutely. But I'll read you this. Lead in a loafer, lead in compassion, lead in fun, lead in your own fashion. Lead by falling forward when you make a mistake. Lead by giving more than what you take. Lead when your strategy is a forward-looking story. Lead when the task in front of you holds no glory. Let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Lead and follow in the footsteps of all your heroes. Lead by creating out of happy accidents. Lead by taking risks when there's no precedent. Lead by following the Kapiti trail. Sit, listen, eat, and they'll follow without fail. Lead by digging up diamonds and those around you. Lead when you scale the heights, then plummet to ground zero. Lead with transparency, lead with laughter, lead in celebration, lead in disaster. Lead with your strengths, lead in honesty, lead when you see between the lines of policy and into the people's eyes. Lead even in the times you just want to follow, lead for today, lead for tomorrow. Lead when you want to end all injustice. Lead in the crowd. Lead when it's just us. Lead when you want to revolutionise, when you no longer want to be hypnotised by what everyone else says is right. Lead when you have your vision in sight. Lead from the front, lead from behind. Lead from the middle, wherever you find your standing place. In the workplace, in the home. Lead when everyone's watching and when you're alone. Lead with an eye on your dream, an eye on the rest. Lead when you can look at yourself and assess your weaknesses and strengths with clarity, remembering humility and charity. Lead when you're brave enough to ask different questions, and when the answers aren't good enough, to raise objections. Lead and give yourself permission to fail. Lead and take the less often walked trail. Lead and never forget to be kind. Lead with the heart bound up with the mind. Lead with a child's curiosity. Lead with the end goal of unity. Lead with national excellence and innovation. Lead through intimate conversation. Lead with courage and determination, even in the face of discrimination. Lead. Lead with balance, a sense of fair play. Lead to help others. Lead in this way. Lead when you learn your failures are a test. Lead as you learn to lead from the best. Thank you.